This is a video put together to just demonstrate how ServiceNow orchestration can call a SQL script dynamically and pass dynamic values from the ServiceNow instance all the way through to the local, in this case Microsoft SQL Server instance. This can be done a few different ways, so I just set up a quick batch file to do this and takes in some dynamic inputs. But if you wanted to use stored procedures or web services or REST calls, there's a number of different ways this could be done. This is just one way to do it. So as you look at the screen here, this is a virtual machine I have running in my environment, and it's actually running a mid server. So my cloud ServiceNow instance is what is communicating with my virtual machine running here on my laptop. But as you look at this, you'll notice I've got this run SQL batch file that I created in this Windows instance, and this is the path to the SQL command exe. So the SQL command exe is available, I believe, in all instances of SQL Server, and you can use it to create or invoke, I should say, SQL commands from the command line. And so that's what we're doing here. There's a number of parameters you can set. You could also set explicit username and password if you want to do that. I'm just using the standard trust that's already there. Here's the part that's interesting. So this insert statement here. So we're inserting into employees table. So I've got this pointed to our to my Northwind database. I should have pointed that out. So we're going to insert into the employees table, and you can see I've just named a couple of fields, and you could name as many of the fields in the table as you want. So I just did a couple, and then the values are dynamic. So these are actually going to come in order from the command line. So the order I pass them in would have to align with the order that maps to the field name. So in this case, %1 is going to be the first parameter passed on the command line, and %2 will be the second parameter passed on the command line. So that's the batch file that we're going to execute from ServiceNow. Behind the scenes here, this is Microsoft SQL Server Enterprise Manager, and you can see we're only up to record 10 here, or the employee ID 10, and then last name Smith Bob is the last record here. So this will get updated here in a second. So I'm going to switch over to ServiceNow, and so this is ServiceNow workflow, and I just have one activity. This is actually an activity that can be downloaded off of Share. All it's really doing is making it easier to create a record in our ECC queue, which is what the mid server talks to get its commands for the local stuff. But in this workflow, I'm just going to run this from workflow. I'm going to show you the inputs I've set. So I've got two inputs. I've got last name and first name. So those are the two inputs that this workflow is expecting. Now I'm just doing it that way for this example, but these could also be service catalog request variables, which I'll likely do another example that shows that as well. But conceptually, what we're doing here is we're going to fire off a workflow. We're going to pass in a couple of dynamic values, and those values that we key in dynamically are going to get passed down the wire to your local instance and insert those values into the database. So this run local command activity, just taking in the command to run. You can see here I've got c:"run SQL.bat, so that's the location of my batch file that does the SQL command that we just looked at a little bit earlier. And this is specifying a dynamic parameter, so in this case the first name that's being typed in for an input, which you'll see here in a second, and the last name. So these are dynamic, and that's really it. You just tell it what mid server you want to target, which this is the one that's set up on my virtual machine. And then I'll go ahead and run this. So this is just a test harness that I put in place just to validate this will work. So if I type in first name John, last name Doe, and hit submit, what we should see is over here now when I refresh, and this may take, oh, it came in real quick. Usually it takes 5 seconds or so. You can see now that a record has been created in the database from those values that have keyed in the workflow. If I were to switch back over to workflow and do another one, so if I refresh this, you'll see that it's gone to the end. If I were to invoke it again, Jane Doe, and submit, we'll switch back over to our VM and refresh. It may take a few seconds. So the way the mid server works is it's on a timer and it goes and pulls commands from ServiceNow on an interval of, I think, 15 seconds by default. So as you look here now, there's Jane Doe. So basically what's happened here is our workflow is instantiated. It's created a couple of entries in the ECC queue. The mid server's picked it up and run whatever command we told it to run, which in that case was a command to run that batch file. So that's it. Anytime you want to have a process in ServiceNow reach out and talk to a local, in this case Microsoft SQL Server, here's an example of how you can do that.